Welcome, good afternoon, and welcome to all present. We are embarking on the second leg of what we started earlier today with the masterclass on innovation, management, measurement, which is still the theme that we are continuing with. From the masterclass, we looked at the theoretical aspect of this topic and what it means practically in terms of the standards, how the standards are developed, the relevance of the standards, their meaning in relation to innovation management measurement, and the role that our co-founder, Prof. Benny Anderson, as well as our co-presenter, Mmakgabo Maheya, who is sitting right opposite me here, have played in shaping the development of a committee that has been representing the South African voice internationally. On the table are various guests. First, we have our doctoral student. The Curiosita actually has a big focus on the doctoral students' research. And traditionally, the research would be aligned to the topic that we are exploring today. In this context, however, this is not the case, but Mr. Kgosane Motshekga had already raised his hand and wanted really very much to share with us his doctoral journey and what he is discovering and uncovering in this process. So we will start with him before we move to our next keynote presenter, Dr. Phumuza Langa, who I will also introduce at the right time. We also have our executive of marketing, Ms. Ofentse Rapakadi, who has really contributed very much instrumentally in ensuring that we are where we are today and contributing in understanding this conversation critically. We have our executive dean and head of research, Dr. Gavin Isaacs. We've got Prof. Paul Singh in the room, who plays a very critical role as well in the research agenda. We do have Prof. Lucky Matebula, who is also a head of faculty for people. I am the head of faculty for innovation, Dr. Isaacs, head of faculty for systems, and Prof. Anderson, head of faculty for technology. So we are looking at the innovation piece in terms of the T today. But we will begin with Mr. Kgosane Motshekga from the DaVinci Institute, who is a doctoral student right now, and he will take us through his thesis topic on developing a framework for an automatic fare collection system in the city of Johannesburg Metropolitan bus service. Unfortunately, his supervisor, Prof. Shilisi, is not here, so we would have started with introducing Prof. Shilisa, who would then introduce the student and the topic, but we will hand over to you, Mmakgabo Motshekga, and then after your presentation, we will open it to all present for questions, reflections, interrogation, all really to support you in your journey, not at all to do anything else but to empower you. So receive it from whence it comes. Over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, scholars, and distinguished guests. So my topic is as follows. So the topic that I'll be delving into is as follows: is developing a framework like that, what I've already indicated, for automatic fare collection system, and specifically looking at Metrobus. So Metrobus, which I believe that it was at the center. So when we attended, I remember when I attended one of the conference where Metrobus was in an ICU. So I believe that as an individual, I took it upon myself to look into what could I be able to assist so that they can be able to move out of the environment where they are currently at. So that's where the study was triggered, because they needed solutions which are more practical, which they also embed technology, so that we can be able to understand what is currently happening within the society that we live in, within the communities that we service, within the broader scale of maybe, our economic, the environment that we're impacted. As we are aware, Metrobus also, it's a municipal entity that belongs to City of Johannesburg. So Metrobus, which when it was co-founded when I read their document, so the mission it was to make sure that they provide an affordable transportation to all commuters who are based in the City of Johannesburg, as it used to be called the City of Gold. But now you can see that the economy has shifted. Things are starting to change rapidly, so even Metrobus needed to align itself with what is currently happening. So in terms of the shift in terms of the economy, as well as what is normally impacting us in terms of the pestle factors, your political as well as economical, and as well as your legal framework that is coming within the space of transportation as well. So what we normally, the study aim is as follows, which I'll also indicate what normally, before I even went to the study to choose the topic that I'll be studying for my doctorate. So I was looking at how, we were raised. Sometimes we want to go far instead of looking at closer to where you are brought up. Our mothers used to wake up early in the morning, going to work, relying on the same bus service that we normally is under ICU. So for them, looking at what is currently happening, so with Metrobus, it was pain to myself and even to other people who are observing to see what is currently happening. Because you look at the buses, they're not even, you look at, sometimes I'm coming from that economical background where I was only depending on my mother for providing as a breadwinner there. So my mother used to buy a ticket, so a monthly ticket, so to go to work. Now, with what is currently happening, so there are some mothers who are buying tickets. They can't even ride a bus. Sometimes the buses are not there. Sometimes they don't even understand their consumer behavior, how their passengers are behaving, what is currently happening, what are the patterns, the special improvement that is currently happening. Companies have shifted. So we need to be able to, Metrobus needs to be able to align itself with what is currently happening. Even the economics also plays a role. After COVID, most of the guys, they were laid off. So the world is no longer the same. So it's shifting. Metrobus need to come with an innovative way of improving its services and also understanding its commuters so that they can be able to realize the purpose of them being existing. So there's a author who normally is a motivational author who indicated to say that as a person, you must be able to take you must also look at two things. You must be open to study two things, existing and things that are non-existing, so that we can be able to close a gap, which is Tom Freestone. So he indicated to say that this is where you need to be able to understand the gap. So basically with what is currently happening with Metrobus, so they currently have the technology that is existing, which is manual. Then we need to be able to look at what can we bring in terms of the innovation to close the gap. And when we mix everything, so my mom used to say that, so you can't cut an onion and believe that it will be a chakalaka. So then mixing the two, then the taste, the aroma that you'll get, so you infuse with technology there. So that's where I want to take off there. So then when you look at the aim of the study is to come up with a comprehensive, innovative, and efficient system that facilitate seamless, secure, and cost-effective and fare collection for the City of Johannesburg Metropolitan Bus Service. So by doing so, we are tasked as scholars to be able to look at how we can help them to improve that. By focusing on that, I believe that with the input that I'll be receiving here, we'll be able to enhance customer experience. So for commuters that are normally riding on Metro bus services. And together, as sitting here, we'll be able to improve on the operational efficiency of Metro bus and also look at the impact of technology to improve the Metro bus existence there so that they can rely with technology there. So we must not look at Metro bus same like when we'll be studying the companies that they did not move with time. I once remembered when I was still at Vodacom, so we used to be proud of BlackBerry there and also Nokia because of not being innovative. So now we are no longer talking about that. I don't want to also experience that. So with Metrobus, it should be a company that will be sufficient and existing for longer duration. And we'll also look at the key elements that I'm intending that maybe through your input, it will also touch on people who are traveling, who are commuters, and also the system that will be used. So I've already touched on the context in terms of what impacts on that. It will impact on the micro as well as on the meso and then micro there. So then when you look at that, so it will be the macro side, which is an external, where we'll look at the factors that can be able to assist in terms of shaping this study, the broader one, the broader perspective. How is the society shifting? How is other countries who are operating within the same parameters of where Metrobus is currently operating, and even other provinces that are currently sitting there, so that we can study the policies. We can also look at the urban policies as well as the urban developments and also special programs, so that we can be able to address issues, and also what are the technologies that are using. I was also lucky to go to Cape Town to attend a seminar where they were discussing electrical buses. So looking at what is currently happening, we need to first perfect the fare collection, so as Metrobus. So that's where we need to start by focusing on. Or let's say as city employees, my responsibility was Metrobus to perfect the fare collection, because Metrobus, it has a second economy. I'll call it a second economy. When I was delving in the study, I've picked up that Metrobus, there's a lot of second economy. I'll explain what is I refer to as second economy. Most of the money is not even accounted because of the poor technology, the legacy technology that they're using. They can't even tell you. When you ask for information, the data is not as accurate as you'll want, so that you can make an informed decision. When you look at data is becoming a more scarce resource and most expensive resource. So with the technology that we are envisaging, that if we conclude the study, if they can adopt, it will be able to improve on Metrobus side. Then we are looking at also engagement with stakeholders as well as organizational impact and also technological integration. So that's what we'll be looking at in terms of the context of the study. So yes, I just want to summarize. Let me not sound like I'm a preacher now. So before I can circulate the basket for the collection, so then let me just summarize the topic that I'm now talking about. In terms of what I've basically, I'm happy that when they did an introduction, they spoke about what are the challenges. So the theoretical framework that are there, and as well as the practical, we should also come up. We need to be able to zoom into theoretical framework that we can be able to map, so that they can be able to guide us. So the reason why I chose to come to a DaVinci institution, it's the framework that they have, the theoretical one, which is TIPS, which is resonate with the study that I wanted to uncover, which I believe that it will be able to assist me to be able to add value to the study, and also to understand more about how to deploy the TIPS framework to be able to achieve this particular study there. So then I want to close by saying, I'm still here, so I'm still open for the questions have indicated. It's a dialogue. A dialogue, you don't have to take it personally. It should be able to build you. So I'm also open to that so that we can be able together. This solution doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us sitting here. Whatever that will be proposing, whatever that will be adding value, I'll be able to incorporate based on the assessment and also on how effective it will be able to add value on the study that I'm currently conducting at Metrobus. I just want to say I thank you, and I don't take granted for the opportunity given to me.
Hi, I'm Barbara Holtman. I want to ask if you've looked at the impact of the essentially the mafia state of the taxis and the taxi associations in terms of their impact on the bus service, and is it possible that any innovation regarding the buses will actually make the difference if we can't do something about the taxis, because the lawlessness of the taxis and the violence of the taxi associations must surely have a huge impact on the bus service and on who uses the buses and on the value of that service. So, I mean, I think it's a fantastic thing that you are looking to enable greater use of the bus service, but I just wonder if you've looked at those outside factors as well. Thanks very much.
I didn't actually capture the problems identified or problem statement, the current practice versus the desired outcome that you want to see. Throughout my listening, I was just trying to grasp what is it that is actually the problem with the current practice that you've identified, and what is it that you envisaged to achieve at the end. Okay. So it's not that difficult.
Okay, thanks. The practical essence or the practice at the institution now. So based on my research that I've already conducted, and also on the desktop research that I've done prior to me choosing a topic, it was they rely on a manual process. That is the practice, which is prone to, to pilferage. So which is prone to not, accounting for even the passengers. Because I asked even about the occupancy on the buses, I couldn't get even the answer at that particular spot. When is your peak, and how do you then arrange your shift in such a way that it addresses your needs down there at the community there, so that you can be able to understand when is your off peak, when is your peak. So I couldn't get that. So in terms of the study there, so the current challenges is that they rely on the manual process from the entire value chain. When the bus start leaving the depot, they can't even account for the bus that is even on the road, not even knowing whether that bus already pitched at that particular stop sign or pitched at the required destination there. They require on manual processes sometimes. So we need to find ways, because the economy is changing. So city is no longer willing to fund. I was reading an article from the council side. They are saying that we can no longer fund a dead horse. So at the same time you are funding, you can't even break even. They can't even say that with at least not even let alone their role is not to make a profit, but at least to break even, to be able to account for your operational expenses. They can't do that because of why? Because of the current practice that is currently happening. Once, if you can unpack that and you put together a system that will be able to assist in terms of how is the revenue collected. Mostly, if you can look at the article now, there are a lot of disciplinary activities that are happening. So 14 cashiers, when I was reading the other article from City of Johannesburg, they are now under suspension because of you know, when you put a cookie jar there, you are not even accounting for it. You'll also tempt people's feelings as well. But if you put processes in place and practice, that will be able to add value. So it will help in terms of that. That is the core of this particular study. It will look at the entire value chain. When the bus leaves there, the safety of the commuters is also essential. When you look at the revenue collection, when you look at the accountability, the data-driven, as the entire process, as soon as the bus returns there, and even the revenue that will be able to account for. So then, secondly, I would like to also look into the first question that was asked about the impact of the taxis. One a person indicated to me to say, if you don't take your space, someone will occupy the space. So if Metrobus, they are not taking the space where they currently operate. So I've noticed that with, there's a building where after COVID, they've lost a lot of routes that they were operating on because of the breakage of the buses. Taxi operators, they've set up a rank there because you're opening those opportunities. Passengers and commuters can't stay there without, without any mode of transport. So it's when now, if you don't have efficiency or efficacy systems in place, you'll have a problem. You'll open those challenges. And also the political interference. As you have read, all of us, if you were glued in the media there, currently what is currently happening, the political impact that is currently happening, it also impacts the municipalities. You'll find that the taxi owners are the ones that are in the backbone of that second economy that I was talking about. So where now it becomes difficult to be able to impose on laws, the laws are there. Metropolitan can be able to impose on those laws. So those are the issues that I believe that if Metrobus can be able to seize the opportunity, they will be able to make an impact and also close on what the taxis are normally currently occupying those space. The impact of Metrobus is very high. We must not take it for granted. Most of the consumers, when I was doing the interviews, they rely on Metrobus. They don't want taxis because the violence that is currently taking place with the taxis, everyone wants to be safe. Metrobus is actually at a good position to be able to provide that particular service. I just want to say, to close it, I don't know whether I've covered it, ma'am.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, one of the major things that I learned at DaVinci was to regard everything as being a system and to look at the whole system before attempting to make any kind of intervention. And you talk about Joburg Metro Police, for instance, and yet we know that the rates of corruption there are extremely high. I mean, we're doing some work at the moment on frontline corruption, as it's called. And for me, the whole system of the violence of the taxis, the lawlessness of the taxis, the fact that the taxis are not impounded but are regularly stopped by all three, SABS, provincial police and JMPD, but on payment of a bribe, they continue on the roads. This means that the whole system is kind of rigged against formal modes of transport. And so for me, the safety of people and the idea that you can reclaim space maybe needs to be interrogated more deeply, because it's not a linear thing of the spaces being used here and then we'll just take it back. There's a kind of a whole systemic failure that has gone on there, and I agree with you, the state of the city of Joburg is particularly conflictual around all of these things. So, I mean, I think it makes for a fascinating study, but I'm just wondering if your proposed intervention might not change if you look at where the Metrobus sits in terms of that whole system, and how you can transform the system into something that works, in which an improved system for the Metro bus could be really useful. And I mean, also, if you do come up with an automated system, it could also be useful beyond the Metro bus. So whether or not the Metro bus can make full use of it, you know, there are many other places that one can think of where it could be incredibly useful. So it's just my DaVinci head that makes me say that this is the definition of a complex system.
Now, my question actually piggybacks on yours, Barbara. At large, I wanted to ask your research, is it looking to integrate other transport systems that we already have, particularly the taxis, and maybe specifically the taxis, but we also have the e-hailing market that is coming into the fold that we have to consider it. Even the taxis are forced to consider it. But have you also looked at what Gautrain is doing, where Gautrain, you've got the train, you have the buses, they are working with the taxis, they are creating more like a sort of a Gautrain ecosystem. Some of the projects are in planning stage, where with a Gautrain you should be able to board the transports and also be able to get a haircut at one of their stations and be able to enjoy the niceties that you're not able to enjoy in the train. For instance, you don't eat in the train, in the Gautrain itself, but you can have a stall or at a Gautrain station that is an ecosystem of the Gautrain. So really my question is on that. Have you looked at Gautrain? They already have the platform. They also have the capital to fund their projects. Just so you're not creating a system that is probably in the works. If anything, you need to plug into that system and expand from there, as opposed to creating a parallel system. And maybe in closing, I was hoping to learn on the platform how you proposing to bring this service to the fore, the platform, the cost, who bears the cost, and the very cost of using the system. I'm assuming if it's digital or automated, we will be talking access to devices. Is the market that we're targeting able to service that system? And I'll close here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe let's reframe to say, whilst he is busy with his PhD, I think the nature of the Curiosita is that we should contribute to him and not ask him, so that we just reframe, that we much more come in, make our contributions to his study. He will then distill from what we are saying and enrich his study. The expectation should not be that he will give us the answers. He is a PhD candidate. He is still in the forest. He is discovering a lot of things. He might be in there looking for a springbok, and he might come up with a leopard, you know, and it might chase him, and he needs to tame it and bring it to DaVinci so that we see how he caught the leopard. So I don't have your brief, but I think I must protect you. You know? I need to protect you up front so that you do not find yourself having to answer. You're not supposed to answer all questions. You have triggered us, and thank you for the trigger to say what do you want. That was me intervening to reframe just for the purposes of why we're having the Curiositas with a PhD student as somebody who triggers us to be curious about, but what can this be? I mean, you were more curious than most of us. You saw the taxi industry, you saw the mafia state, you saw all those things. You saw the ecosystem of ticketing, which PRASA has done something already, and they were truncated, where they were trying to introduce a one ticket for all modes of transport. If you remember, PRASA wanted to have a card that you go into the taxi with it, into the bus with it, into the train with it, even into the Gautrain, and you go to the airport. When you land in Cape Town, they were as ambitious to say, when you land in Cape Town, the same ticket, you can use it in the public transport in Cape Town. That was when Lucky Montana was still vibrant. I don't want to say more. But I'm saying that, so we need to reframe and say, he's dealing with the ticketing system. Is it the issue that Maheya, from your lessons from SABS, is this an issue? Can we give him something to look at and all those things? I'm not commenting, I was just creating a framework so that you are freer. I'm still going to comment later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for outlining the focus of your study. And thanks, Prof, for the protection you gave him, because yeah, but I really have to also preface my comment or my question to say that they're not necessarily questions that are meant to get answers now, but really to give some perspective or a different look or a better look at the study itself. But I'll keep them light, and there are two questions. The first one is linked to what Mr. Maheya was saying earlier on, but I want to put it slightly different, because my slant is more towards the quantification of the value of the innovation, the impact. In coming up with this study, the desktop study that you referred to, and of course taking into account the challenges that you were mentioning, did you get an appreciation of the opportunity cost of the current system, such that when you do that, you will be in a better position to understand the significance of the value of the outcome of your study? I don't know if I'm making myself clear. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is this, that what is the end game here? Now, I'm really sorry if you mentioned it. The end game, are you looking at the acquisition of an appropriate technology, or are you looking at demonstrating through your study the importance of innovation, and that's where it ends? Whatever they do with it, it's their business. Do you want to demonstrate the value, or do you want to go to an extent of even the acquisition of a system that'll change how they do things at the moment?
Yeah, in terms of quantifying, the one that you indicate in terms of value, I'll go with value proposition in terms of that. So looking at the study there. So indeed, so one must not be naive. When you embark on a study there, you also want to assess the ROI, return on investment, on the project that will be embarking on, or the study that will be embarking on. So whether it will be able to add value to the organization, will it be bearing the returns to the organization? So then in terms of quantifying your study there. So in terms of the current technology, I was privileged to be on the project that dealt with assessment of the current system, which is a legacy one, the one that I'm talking about. So which I won't say that there will be some opportunities that we can be able to improve on that particular study there, so that we can be able to, to have that opportunity, to look at that opportunity cost and also look at the value proposition that we can be able to derive out of the current study that we're envisaging. So looking at the legacy one, as I've indicated, revenue, if you can look at, which is a public document, it's available even on the website. The revenue collection from Metrobus is not looking good. One mustn't close an eye, whereas you should be putting an eye gene and look at the state, what is currently happening there. One must not close an eye and look the other way around. So without having to go there, and even looking at deeper, the cost, the root cause analysis of what contributed to the revenue there. When I went there and looked at what could be the root cause analysis for the revenue dipping each and every year, if you can go and make an assessment of the previous and the past financial years, you will see revenues dropping at a rapid rate. Then when you look at that, it's because of when you look at reading the financial statement and looking at their policy documents and that, they don't have a proper system in place where you can be able to assess the impact, where you can be able to assess every time what you are putting in, can you be able to recover there? They don't have that. So with the current study, my proposal is to say, let me look into that, look at other countries and other provinces that they've adopted the similar approach or even improving on those current technologies that are there, so that Metrobus can be able to get at least a value out of the entire proposition. Looking into, I believe that I'll also tally it with the previous question that I was not even, it was a question, but so which I was not even mandated to even answer that. But I'll also tally it with that. Even if you look at our ecosystem, so yes, I've also studied the entire transport system ecosystem, as well as the National Developmental Plan, where it talks about the integration. So which other, they've also tried it. So which there were the pros and cons in terms of what they've already tried and what you can learn from the, what they've already contributed. Then from the lessons that they've already built, it will help in terms of shaping Metrobus studies in such a way that we can be able to adopt, improve, because we're talking about technology, innovation measurement, so that we can be able to adopt and even measure in terms of what, are we shifting the needle or not? So in terms of the technology improvement, in terms of the current one. So then in terms of what is currently happening at Metrobus, they do have the budget for that, for the technology. So which is based on the CapEx. When I read, and also when I was busy engaging with when I was doing a preliminary test to look at whether the topic will be viable or not in terms of looking at the study there. So the budget is there. When you look at their budget, they always table it even at the council, where they want to invest on the technology, but they know how. They want to have a technology that can be able to address what is currently happening within their system, which is sitting on the OPEX and the CAPEX of that particular organization. So thanks.
So I'm glad you're doing this study, and while it's focusing on innovation, the big theme is innovation, don't restrict yourself to thinking bus. The issue of ticketing and innovation has been applied in this country. In 2010, we got it right. For the World Cup, we had a ticketing system which was foolproof. Nobody was able to take a single cent from those tickets. Nobody could pass a ticket back. Like after I go here and I pass it over the fence or under somewhere, it was anti-pass back just by the code on a ticket. So my suggestion to you is think beyond bus, because the idea of innovation is open. Okay, now the second thing is, I'm glad you mentioned the second economy, and I will say, as a person who thinks economically, and you're dealing with a business problem of a company that's, as you said, in ICU, you want to resurrect this and you want it to be viable. So I think you are making a big assumption, and that is that if you digitalize this, your problem is solved. But the reverse side of it, just think about it. Very advanced digital technologies, like our banking system, there are employees inside who for 5 and 6 years have been stealing. They're in jail. Okay? Some of them have got out of jail, but they're on restrictions. So there's an opportunity here for you, like the colleagues mentioned, to look at, if you're going to suggest digital technologies, let that come out from your data. Don't assume that this is the answer. I think that is something that you've got to think about. So I also want to see, and I'm glad that you said, your theory, you're looking at the TIPS framework, because you would have to balance, I think, two things. And for me, I see it in the people and the systems. Yes, overall it's about innovation, but in the people and systems, because there's a side of social justice here. You're not going into establishing an Uber. It's Metro Bus. And what's the philosophy of Metro Bus? You know the issues and the challenges that the people have, who the market is for it as well. So it's balancing that interest in terms of social justice, access to. It's not only access to the transport, because the transport makes access available to everything, to schooling and to work, etc. So to look at it from that side of things, but also, like mentioned, the system side, because it's a whole, it goes beyond transport when you talk about the systems. It's how the society, how the city of Joburg, if you're talking just Joburg, how it is structured. Okay? So to look at it beyond just transport. Thank you very much.
My contribution is very short. I was just looking at, we want to see how we can improve our connections, but I'm not looking at technology. A lot of people are using the smartphones, can develop an app, and that will make connection easier and to some extent temper-proof. When you get into the bus, you can just tap your phone. The driver will have a screen as well. It shows there's no money in the account in the phone, and green says cannot, should be as easy as that. And then over and above that, you've got smart cameras that you deploy in the bus, that you can then reconcile how many people got into the bus today. There are 100 of them. You can see that in the camera. They are intelligent cameras. So then the two systems can talk together, and at least by then, to some extent, we have anything to do with connection.
So in terms of the comment that you're putting across, I think I value what Prof. you commented on earlier, which I didn't have a privy to comment on, which I'll also look into that. And also it's a bone that I'll be chewing when I get home today. So let's hope that I won't be boneless tomorrow. So that's what I'll be looking into, so that I can be able to improve on. I believe that the study is not necessary to say that you are coming up with any innovation that is coming out of space, where if we can be able to make an improvement, it matters most. If I can be able to My role is to say that let's propose a technology that will be able to make an improvement. Even if we can make an improvement of 20% or 10%, it's a high achievement if you can look at how our GDP is growing. It's not even growing at 1%. So then that's what I'm looking into. I'm not looking into reinventing something that will accelerate into 100% graduate. It should be, compounded. So basically to achieve that, other people, they should piggyback on what I've already left so that they can improve it and it can achieve where we want to go. I'm happy that my colleague, you've indicated that smartphones, yes, are critical. So if you can look at AI, it's also taking the corner stage. So if you can look at that. But even with smartphones and even smart cameras, you also need an integration of systems and technology. So to be able to incorporate, so they cannot be looked at as a single interface. So that's what I've picked up when I was doing data analysis. They've got systems, but they're sitting, the other one doesn't read to another one. The other one doesn't read to another one. So then in terms of their legacy systems, that's where now you are saying, let's come up with an artificial intelligence solution, a framework that will be able to say, if you've got this, you've got this. How do you best sync them or synchronize them in such a way that they give you the intended result that you want as an institution? That is the corner stage of this particular study there.
You're talking about the measurement of the innovation. And like Prophet said, maybe some of the things we must just make sure that we are assisting you take home, and then you can analyze and see if maybe they are constructive or what. In the SABS, we do have standards, and we have got a standards for it's tools and methods for innovation operation measurement guidance document. So the SABS is assisting the students, the researchers. Standards are for sales, but there's a provision for the researchers to get such documents for free. So maybe it's one of the things that you can just consider and then read and check how do they say about the measuring of the operation, measurements of innovation. It's SANS 56008.
Okay.
Sure.
My 2 cents is your study is an academic study, and you might want to look at other theoretical frameworks that support the study, because you mentioned the TIPS framework, but there are others. I can think of one which is diffusion of innovation, how people go about adopting innovation, etc. I would also recommend or suggest that in your next session, if you are going to participate in this again, you also stress on the how, which is, the research design and methodology, because you didn't share that with us. And reality is, when you embark on this kind of project, it's going to be marked by academics, and I have actually learned that apparently that's what academics look out for.
When we were in the earlier master class, Mmakgabo Maheya, he gave us a definition of innovation. He said it's a need to be managed to guarantee success. That's what he said. He said it's a need to be managed to guarantee success. So maybe your study, it's about systems to collect revenue, or it's about lack of revenue in Metrobras, or it's about challenges to revenue collection in the Metrobus. So there are 3 things that, as we are answering, you came up with. And the question is, what is the need that we are managing in your study, and what success do we want to guarantee if your study is about innovation? I'm just taking his definition of innovation, which the SABS is using, and not only SABS, but there's a standard which they are using, and it's an accepted standard. The one that is SANS 56,000, and it's got 56,001. What is referring you to? It's a whole lot of standards that are dealing with innovation. You are better advised to look at it. But Prof. Paul also spoke about when you deal with Metrobus, it's a public transport. So you need to say, which public are you talking about? Are you talking about the paying public? Are you talking about a beneficiary public? Because in that public, in the morning, there are kids that are on a no-fee schooling system, therefore, which means they don't have fees to pay into that bus. So therefore, how does that impact on your revenue? Because these kids, they are going to schools that they are not paying. And they are not paying to be at that schools, but to get to the schools they are paying is your model of revenue collection. If you tighten that, are you including a pay to go to where you are not paying? It's something else. And there is also things like subsidies. Who subsidizes? Where does the subsidy of public transport go? In other countries, you just get into the bus is not being paid because the money is collected through either the provincial tax system or the national tax system or the local government tax system. But all those taxation systems are forms of revenue to the bus service. You hear what I'm saying? So when you say there's no collection, there might be other methods of collecting to make the bus service to be there. But he also spoke about when we go to these industrial revolutions, we rush to go to the bigger revolution, and we don't understand what does the revolution mean. So when you say fifth industrial revolution, it talks about AI and whatever, then we rush there, but actually we are at a stage where we cannot be there. For example, maybe we need electric buses so that we remove the cost of petrol or diesel, and that will make public transport free. So it is the multidimensionality of how you look at revenue that will make your study to speak to your context in the TIPS model. Because TIPS also, it doesn't only talk about technology, innovation, people and systems, but it also talks about the context at which you are studying. So you have a contextual issue of a developing country, lot of poor people, and that cannot afford. They are on a social grant system, and so on and so on. So I thought I must contribute with no, I'm not soliciting any comment or answer. I just wanted you to factor that into your study. And the taxi industry, even if it's a mafia state element or whatever, but you should look at them as competition. They are competing with the buses. It is how they compete which is an issue. But they are competitors. It is how they compete which is an issue. But they are competing for the people that are in the buses. So we should treat them as competitors, but call to order their form of competition. But they are competitors and they have a right to be in the business of moving people from one point to the other. But as long as they respect that there are other people who can do that for free or lesser. Thank you.
I think what Prof. Lakia said is very important. For me, is this an issue of generating revenue? Is this an issue to reclaim the space? Is this an issue about using technologies and innovation to make a system that is existing currently better? And I think that is what we need to look at. What I would like to see also is the issue of disruption and how technology can play a role in disrupting business. Or I think you started off by saying that there were issues of buses not running, and then eventually COVID hit and people were laid off and it disrupted the whole. So what is your study going to do in terms of contributing? Because that can happen again. I mean, we can have what we had in KZN in the July 2021 incidents. We could have, it spilled over into Gauteng to an extent. So how are we going to cope with those kind of disruptions? And how's your system, your study going to contribute? If this is a revenue generating issue, if this is a social issue, how do we see that play out? From a comparative perspective, and I want to maybe throw this out there. Let's move away from the metro bus aspect a little bit, and let's see what the holistic picture is of what you're trying to achieve. And in doing so, you may want to look at what else is out there. You did mention it, but I think we must make a concerted effort to include that in the full scope of the study, to say what else is what is in the Western Cape, what is in KZN, what is in Lesotho for that matter, and do that comparison, because at this level, we need to think broader than just what the study is looking at currently. Because I want to throw that out there, because I don't want us to have any challenges moving forward. So I think there's a distinct advantage in terms of the study that you're doing, but what I would like you to focus on going forward also, and you started off by telling the story of your mom traveling at the time. So there's a definite social impact that the study is going to make, but I need for that to seep through very, very clearly, because that is what innovation is all about. It's what is going to contribute to society eventually. That is why otherwise we don't bother innovating. We stay with what we have, and it's not going to add any value to anything further. So I think I would like to see personally what the social impact of it's going to be, but it doesn't have to stop there. If there's anything else that flows out of it, that would be great as well. But that is just my contribution. Thank you.
We've had a fair focus on the research topic of Mr. Kgosane, and Mr. Kgosane, thank you for committing to come and share, and I want to thank each and everyone present here, even those who have not necessarily voiced anything. Their presence here is actually saying we acknowledge you, we see your study, we are supportive. There are, however, critical aspects and feedback that has been provided, and I believe each and every one of it is very much relevant. So I think with that, we are going to move into the final aspect of today's Curiosita, which, as I've already said, started with the masterclass earlier on when Dade Maheya took us through the innovation management standards and setting the theoretical frame. And now we are going to invite Dr. Phumuza Langa to speak to innovation management, measurement in practice. So we move from the theory into the practice. I think you would appreciate from a DaVinci perspective the aspect of balancing theory and perspective in the transdisciplinarity of how we approach reality is a very critical way or drive that we use in our approaches, which also I think it would be lovely to see how you bring that into your study, the transdisciplinarity of this study, and where are you going to look for the more that was posited by Prof. Singh when he said, from ICU to beyond, he's taking us into transdisciplinarity and what the heterogeneous perspectives of that could be, and where the diverse social contributions, as Dr. Isaacs has already said. So the DaVinci lenses need to come alive in the study so that it moves from the potential risk of become another cut and paste of multiple things that have been raised here, but into a palpable solution that will really breathe life into our reality. In terms of standards, we need to be responding to our reality and addressing South African issues. So from innovation management, measurement in terms of standards and how they could be used to create a shift from Metrobus being an ICU to how we practically apply them in terms of the application of it practically. I'm going to invite Dr. Phumuza to give us first his reflections on what this could practically mean in terms of some of the standards. There are many of them, and you have been guided, but there are other, and he comes from a technical perspective, and I'll share his bio just now. So Dr. Phumuza Langa is currently employed as the Senior Manager Commercial Analyst at the University of Johannesburg Technology Transfer Office. He has a PhD in Operations Management from UJ with a study focusing on dynamic capabilities developed by innovative enterprises from technology business incubation services. His initial career was in a biotechnology startup company, Mmakgabo Biotech, as a laboratory technician in the DNA sequencing laboratory after completing his studies in life sciences related qualifications, diploma in biotechnology and BTech degree in pharmaceutical sciences. He then moved on to management studies, starting with a BCom in management and a master's in organizational leadership. He has 15 years of experience within the field of innovation management, where he has played various roles in intellectual property commercialization in several publicly financed research and development institutions in South Africa. These include being previously employed as the R&D Outcomes Manager at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, responsible for IP commercialization matters within the Material Science Manufacturing Unit, followed by being a commercialization manager at the University of Pretoria, where he was responsible for a wide range of technology transfer aspects, such as IP licensing, seed fund management, and business plan development. His research interests are within the field of strategic management of technological innovations, with a particular focus on IP commercialization, business incubation, spin-out companies, and technology transfer at large. Dr. Phumuza, welcome and thank you for your time. Over to you.
And thank you very much for the invite from DaVinci. I suppose maybe then, I guess, when I got the invite, it was quite interesting because I said, okay, what will I be coming as? Because, I mean, I currently work as a commercialization, manager, which is, I suppose, a fancy word for somebody who sits
in an armchair and observes what happens externally. If you work in a university, that is, because we are what they call armchair commercialization practitioners, because we're not necessarily in industry. We're in a university, so we're like quasi-industry because we're doing commercialization, but we're not in it. So one is somehow like, I suppose, an outsider looking towards industry, because we're trying to imagine what the industry is doing, and then we try to see what we have as technology and R&D that can go to industry. And I suppose then it's almost like a metaphorical onion, because the sort of layers before you get to industry and transfer technology, you somehow have to understand a number of things. I heard colleagues talk about the ecosystem. You have to understand how we break into that ecosystem and finally get to the core, the operational core of the business, because they would have to decide whether they're adopting technology that we bring from industry, from the university to industry, because our researchers are maybe, let's say, in a laboratory and they're working on a new formulation and they're imagining that industry would want to use it, and sort of like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole and so on. And so it's almost like, breaking through that layer and getting to the operational core. So there's this song that says, make the circle bigger. So no, the circle is small. It's actually smaller. So we're really trying to get to the to that. I suppose that the metaphorical onion is used in research as well. Sanders and how you break down those in terms of understanding methodology. But I thought I'll just put that to as a starting point, because that's where I would like to start. Okay, but then I suppose we then agree that, okay, fine, I'm not necessarily coming as an industry expert as such, because I'm not, although we work with industry. But I'm also not coming as an innovation expert. I'm just coming as an innovation management enthusiast or practitioner. Okay, I'm comfortable with practitioner because, for the past 15 years, we've sort of been practicing the whole innovation management element. And interestingly enough, even though I've been a practitioner, I only came across the innovation management standards last year. When I was looking for something in a paper I was trying to write, and then I found out that there was a standard. So I went to try to purchase the standards at SABS when I dropped my kids off school. And the SABS was close by, and I was told, no, but there's somebody at UJ who was there, but it left, and I could actually join the committee. So my executive director then allowed me to. And it's been a very fantastic set of people and the committee, and what happens there, very, very important. So that's how I ended up getting into just being involved in the innovation management standards and so on. And what they've really made me realize is that we need a systematic and structured way in which innovation management should be done and practiced or understood, because for somehow, we've been just managing innovation in a way that we understand it. And of course, the standards and the developments have been around for some time, and so on. And I found it very important. So that's why now I'm really involved in them in that sense. And of course, colleagues would be saying, oh, but then innovation cannot be, standardized. Innovation is about creation and so on and so forth. And so why you want to be involved in standards, standardizing something that should be allowed to take place on itself? But I mean, as a management scholar, I suppose it's not about the innovation, but it's about management. And the management of innovation can be standardized, because we have to understand management and management practices, and we all have to somehow be in that at least starting point or some sort of reference point, and that's how I've been leaning towards that philosophy. Okay, but then I suppose I'll talk a bit more about the innovation management standard for innovation management measurement element of the standard, because there's a series of standards. You've got the 6000, and then 01, 5602, and so on and so forth, touching on the different elements. And of course, as Mr. Maheya mentioned, that the 5608 talks about operational innovation management measurement. Okay, but before I get to the operational innovation management measurement as a standard and my interpretation and understanding, I'd like to talk about the measures of innovation outputs as such in a technology transfer setting where I currently work. So, and I'll talk about 10 things that we look at. So the first thing is patenting. Okay, so we try to understand the number of patents that come out of a university setting, or related intellectual property. Because not all things, that are being researched or there's R&D on will have an output of patents, but some will lend themselves to design, sometimes plant breeders' rights, trademarks, or copyright, and so on. So intellectual property protection sort of for us forms as a very important basis at the end of the year when we take account of what we've been doing. Did we manage to get patents or industrial designs where they filed and protected? It becomes sort of one of our number one indicators. But secondly, not necessarily everything that is being researched is at a final stage, because it's a process. When the researchers are innovating, they are trying to get from one level to another. So we have a very important barometer called the technology readiness levels. So it's been used, as far back as NASA, when that's where it was launched, when they tried to send the rocket to the moon, to say, okay, as we are developing this device, at what level are we on? Are we at basic research? Are we at a proof of concept? Are we at validation, and so on? So some of our technologies and innovations, we always try to find out where are we in the technology readiness level barometer. With TRL 1, there's 1 up to 9. That becomes a very important factor for us to measure the innovation. And it sort of forms the underpinning way in which we look at our portfolio innovations. Because at the end of the day, as we develop these technologies, it comes to the third element of measure, which is funding. So are we able then to raise funds? And will these funds then be injected to take us from one TRL to another? And of course, the sources of funds or the color of money is different. Okay, you find technology development funding like you would find in institutions like Technology Innovation Agency, or as you go up the TRLs towards commercialization, you would find IDC money and so on and so forth. So understanding your TRLs is important. Or even before technology development, when you're looking at seed funding, early stage, just after you get that basic research concept, TRL 3 to 4, when you're starting to do validation, needing a bit of seed funding. So it talks directly to those components. And I suppose maybe moving to the fourth measure for us, which relates to evaluation, technology evaluation agreements. So we try to get into collaboration or evaluations of this technology in a real life setting, because it's one thing to say, okay, we've extracted a molecule from a plant. The colleagues at biochemistry had a lot of fun, but then now they want to do formulation, but we don't even have a capsule formulation machine at the university. So we try to go to industry and say, can you help us formulate this into a capsule and do a bit of small batch run for us? So I go to industry and try to find partners who can do that, or whether it's an industrial design student who is trying to find a way to create we've got a project, for example, on an evacuation chair that can double up as a bed, but we don't have the machines and infrastructure in the university to create that. They can device, so we have to talk to a manufacturing company to then be able to sort of develop it and so on. Or whether it's diagnostic kits, which is one of the technologies, where to find a company that can then at least put those particular molecules into a cartridge, and we can start having innovations starting to take a sort of a life or form of their own, which otherwise would not exist in a university. So that becomes the fourth important measure for us: how many technology innovation agreements or collaborations we're having, agreements with industry. But then I suppose the number 5, towards halfway of what we look at, is the number of products that eventually come from this, because IP and TRLs and evaluations are just leading towards that. But if we have an actual product, then we say, okay, number of products that we actually managed to develop. But when these products exist, on the flip side, now we need to go to industry, because these need to be really commercialized. And this is, then it becomes very important to understand, how do we transfer technology? So we transfer technology through what we call licensing. So I suppose it's like renting, or because if you have a house and you allow them to use your house, then they pay rent. Then it's, in this instance, in licensing, it's royalty. So number of licenses become important for us, number 6 measure, but equally the amount made from licensing. So it's one thing to say I've got 10 license agreements with industry, but then remember I said licensing is like renting out your house. You can have a rental agreement, but if someone's not paying you rent, then you have no income. So the amount made from licenses becomes your measure for us, which is the number 1 income revenue sort of indicator would be the royalty. But then again, we also negotiate these transactions in terms of paying upfront, because we say, okay, look, before we got here, we developed this, so we incurred some costs. Can you take that up, put that up front as a way of showing that you committed to the technology? Of course, industry always pushes back and says, but I didn't ask you to do the R&D. I wasn't there. But okay, we say, okay, can we then make it part of, royalty holiday? You can pay once you start making money and you see value in it. So number 8 for us becomes spin-outs, because not necessarily all technologies would lend themselves to industry. Some of the technologies are so revolutionary that, or incremental, not incremental, disruptive, because incremental ones get easily absorbed by industry, but disruptive technology, sometimes industry is not even ready for those technologies. And we as a university sometimes have to look at the possibility of creating ventures. Can we create ventures? So the number of spin-outs or startup companies become an important indicator for us in terms of, are we innovative enough, and to an extent where we create technologies or innovations that can lend themselves to startup creation. But then again, just like licensing, you have to measure how you make your money, which is royalty. With startups or spin-out creations, would be then the revenue that the company would make. It's one thing to register a company, but it's another thing for that company to make money. That's number 9. Then number 10 is social impact. Because, by the way, not all innovations, of course, and this was also discussed, that sometimes about social impact and society. So sometimes we just come up with a better water filtration mechanism. Water contamination is a problem in an area, and does it have impact in the society, not necessarily make money? That's also equally important. We also have, I'm currently assisting a researcher in biochemistry who is working on technologies for extracting from plants, but we got them knowledge from in a community in KZN, and the indigenous knowledge that was then scientifically validated in the laboratory is important, but as part of how we can help that communities, sort of help them manage their knowledge in the area, and we can bring our botany department to help with creating a herbarium, which I suppose I've learned the other day is a fancy word for a plant library. But I suppose it's not making money in that sense, but it's having impact in the community and society. So I suppose the list, by the way, can go on. And these are my top 10 sort of measures that, in my experience, I've observed, and we try always then use as indicators for us to say, if we achieve these things, then we're really getting our innovations out to industry and making some sort of contribution. But I suppose maybe to get back to the a topic of the day around innovation management standards, measures, and how they are done. So with the 56008, I have access to the standard. I've read it, and I mean, I suppose I'll just discuss a few takeaways. So maybe let's just start with the word operational innovation management standard measure, innovation management measures. They use the word operational again because, as indicated initially, at the end of the day, it's about the business and how it operates. Of course, it is important to understand things at a strategic level, tactical level, and also operational, but though they've centered around operation, because the business must understand how these innovation outputs, or what it does, end up being accounted for. And so these can be sort of looked at in two ways. One, the intent, because if you're going to innovate, there must be an intent. And with this intent, when you create the value, because I mean, when the innovation definition is also looked at, one of the things is value. I mean, it's one thing to have an invention, but invention without utilization and value, then it's then not helping much. And so in doing that, there's two ways in which I suppose this can be looked at. So it's like, what are the indicators then? Okay, how do you what becomes an indicator for your innovation when you're measuring it, and then I suppose the subsequent matrix, because you have to somehow put some calculations to that without getting too mathematical, but at least understanding input output elements to that extent. And of course, these can either be lagging, you look at what you've done, or leading in terms of looking towards the future. And I suppose maybe having said that, I'll just maybe touch on four things and try to mirror it to what I've indicated, what we do in a university. And then I suppose we can start again with intellectual property. So I suppose in a company, in a company or industry, it would be important to understand, again, okay, if we are then having money that we're putting in a technology development activity, in this instance, we're trying to get a fair collection technology. Are we going to develop it ourselves as a company, or are we going to get it externally? If we do that, we'll still have to pay. If we develop it ourselves, we'll still have to pay. So amount of money spent on the technology development would be a good matrix, but then the technology or patents that come out of that would be a good indicator, right? And by the way, whether they become protectable as well is also equally important. And the one thing about the standards is that it's a guidance, and I think Mr. Maheya mentioned that. So because it's a guidance, it's not prescriptive, but they've got annexures and a lot of examples that reflect that. So you could sort of somehow also use that as a way to customize in the business and try to understand that if it makes sense in that sense. So, but before you perhaps look at the technology development and the patents and the subsequent intellectual property that you can create, another way that they suggest is around assessment, because at the end of the day, customers or users must be there. So what assessments are you doing? Are you doing market assessments? And if the market assessment is your indicator, then a metric would be number of assessments done, or number of assessments that are being done that actually really talk to customer need and the market demand and so on and so forth. Because it's one thing to say, okay, we've got a technology, but will it have enough users? Is it big enough, and so on, which is, I suppose, essential to any business and its operational functionality. But then maybe thirdly, because I mentioned the two now, the intellectual property / technology and the assessments. But you have to think of then the conceptual element, because you have to create these things. So is there an intent to conceptually create these technologies? So is the company investing or putting resources in design thinking, for example, or is it putting any resources in creating these technologies? Whether they are human resources or whether they are financial resources, is there an intent? So if there's no measure around number of hours spent doing these design thinking workshops or exercises, or amount of money spent in creating these concepts, then, conceptually, then there's no intent, and then there's no way that you can measure, I suppose, at the end of the day, whether you're making effort to innovate. And maybe lastly, where I leave it would be on business cases or business plans that you would do. Are there enough business cases that you are doing? Is there a number of business cases that talk to developing these technologies holistically in terms of then the business pursuing these to be opportunities that it can eventually then commercialize, utilize, and ensure that they get applicable in industry, which is why I suppose the business would be existing in the first place. Thanks, I'll leave it at there for now.
You mentioned that you only found the standards last year. So when you look at what you currently measure as a university, as a technology transfer office, would you say you're measuring the right things when you look at the standards?
No, definitely. And of course, they're not prescriptive. That's a good thing. So they are guidance, well, except for 56001, as 5600, yes, 560, which talks about the requirements. But then, all the others are guidance. So the measurement one, the 56008, has like a laundry list of what you can look at. And of course, as indicated when I was trying to say, look at it, what we'll do, for instance, measure number one is IP. The standards talks about IP in terms of how a business can look at its intellectual property portfolio, its patents that it creates, and can protect, and using that as a way to understand its operation is what we do as a university, which mirrors the industry, of course, in that sense. So there are a number of suggestions, indicators, and matrix that they suggest. But then also, for each and every indicator and matrix, there's a questions that they prompt you to ask yourself, to say, is this part of you building an IP portfolio? If it is, then therefore, IP types of intellectual property combination is important, and so on. So yes, of course, they are, but of course the standards have a whole lot to offer in terms of what you can look at. I just touched on 4, which I thought were important, because on the assessment, the one I sort of started having a mental block, we do a lot of assessment. So my job is, again, as an armchair person, is to sit and find data. Although I'm not in the industry and going out to talk to customers, but we should be doing that. But we do assessments, so preliminary assessments. So my KPI is one of my KPIs is number of market assessment studies that I've done, which is what industry would do, and part of the standards makes that suggestion, of course, yeah, and so on. With the concept development, business cases, another KPI is number of business cases that I have to do in a year. So for sure there are similarities, but the standards then also focus on the operation and the crux of the business itself around intent and then outputs in that sense.
My understanding is that, for instance, at the moment, China, in the past few years, they've registered a lot of patents. I think they are ahead of any other country. Second, they are followed by the US and some other countries follow after that. But it seems like in terms of innovation, there is that correlation in terms of the development of the country versus the innovations that they have, as well as the patents that they file. So, but how can we bring that to our country? Because I think that's very important for the growth of the country. But we're also bearing in mind that most of our kids are now running away from the STEM subjects. it becomes a difficult job. So we need to marry the two so that, we can be able to develop as a country. Because without the sciences, we will always be lagging behind. Thank you.
No, I mean, I suppose patents have been for many years a natural or sort of a fallback position to measure innovation. But it's quite interesting. In South Africa, doesn't have an examining system. So existing technologies you can find and get a patent granted. So I suppose the importance would be for South Africa, if we are trying to, and this is always a debate amongst practitioners, is the number of patents that are in countries that examine. Because a patent, for instance, when it has to be granted, they look at novelty. Is it something that's new? Which is always, is something, I think it's always new, really. We can debate that a bit, but okay. Novelty, it must be inventive. So meaning that it must not be obvious to somebody skilled in the art. If you're saying doing something in this way, somebody skilled in the art must have not really thought of it in that way. And then the third element is utility or industrial applicability. So the focus on trying to being inventive and always doing things novel and having industrial applicability or utility would be important, patentable or not, by the way, because not necessarily everything can lend itself to patentability. But I mean, it's a nice measure in that sense, because those three things tell you a lot about what you're doing, and having those technologies being granted in countries that examine is equally important. But South Africa, of course, is working towards examining as well. There's a lot of efforts that are made by the CIPC to try to go that direction, because then if you get a granted South African patent, and more of those, if they come, that will tell us more about then the value and the quality of our patents and our innovations in particular. But in any case, as indicated, intellectual property protection is not only measured by patents. There's industrial designs as well. In the arts and the film industry, for example, there's the creative outputs that you can look at as well. So, an innovative society is not necessarily about the STEM necessarily, but other sciences as well. Social sciences are also a science, by the way, and humanities and technologies that can have impact on humanities and improving lives. In any case, is equally important. So it's not a one lens approach. Yes, I make that example of patents because it's generally utilized, but you have to look at holistically other important indicators in that sense. And of course, a strategy for improving, whether it's as a country or as a university, because it's my, environment where I see things. The faculties that exist, they would have to say, what can humanities do? What can the law faculty do? What can science do? Engineering and so on. And in terms of innovating, and it was not necessarily coming from the one area. And we could be maybe just good at other areas which are not necessarily STEM. It's not a sin, by the way. It's equally important. We are I'm very passionate about frugal innovation, purely because we live in a resource-constrained country. Well, even developed economies have resource constraint, by the way. So also innovating in a frugal way might not necessarily require a traditional STEM, subjects as such, but just a way of thinking, a way of just approaching things would be equally important, and you can draw from other disciplines. And so on and so forth, yeah.
When listening to the 10 points that you mentioned, how you measure and that kind of thing, I've been in industry my whole life, and innovation and new products is difficult. Listening to you, how often do you turn out these new products and new innovations with the muscle of a university behind you? How often do they? It sounds like it's a big substantial part of the university, or is it? Or how often do you turn it into a viable, usable proposition?
Yeah. So that's a very, very a good question, because it talks directly to the time it takes. And I think when I mentioned that, I said it's, intent, it's the output, but that has to happen over time. And so frequency, we have a luxury to a certain extent of historical research and innovation and patents and so on and R&D. So because patents naturally would take 20 years, in terms of it being granted. But if I'm sitting here today, I've just joined, for instance, the university. There's patents that were filed even before my time. So they probably 7 years, 6 years. So I'm then picking up on something that's already moving. And with that, there's been funding that has been put in, and it's been taken through the technology readiness levels and parameters, which is the TRL as a parameter helps us measure that. So I always make an example, and I want to get to the frequency and how often, because not all of them necessarily find themselves as products. But if I make this analogy that if we treat intellectual property just like property for housing, and so if you're a developer, you've got a plain piece of land. If you put a infrastructure, then you are supposed to develop houses. If it's at foundation level and you value it, it's more than when it was a piece of land. It's equally important if it's at a window level or roof level. Every time it gets somewhere, it's something that you've built upon. So there are a number of transactions which are happening with industry, which are not necessarily final products. So we say to a company, look, this technology, because it's not at product level, it is something that can enable maybe a formulation, but it still needs a bit of tweaking, because I'll make an example with the diagnostic kit. We've got the chemistry, but we know that it can give an indicator to see if something is, good or bad. But if you put this in a cartridge, we don't have the cartridge, but you do, then you will have at least a lateral flow diagnostic kit. But this diagnostic kit still needs to give you the 2 solid bands. Okay, so we could get our money from industry. This might not be publicized to say a technology already exists or a product specifically that's commercialized, but we busy talking to industry. Here's a water filtration system, license this, help develop. So we collecting revenue through licensing, but products are not necessarily out. And then a product is out 5-6 years later. But then technology is being moving. So we call technology transfer office, because we try to transfer technology and know-how as much as we can. But industry might not even be using or utilizing that as products immediately. So the frequency annually, we try to get technology as much out as possible, but sometimes it's not necessarily products immediately. They show 2, 3, 4 years later. So I saw, interestingly, there's a picture here with one of the companies that won. I'm not sure what it was awarded for, but they're doing hair screen. So when I was at the University of Pretoria, the colleagues at the audiology department were working on this particular technology at the time. But it wasn't a final product. Just the other day, about 3 years back, I read on Times, they made one of the top 100 fast-growing companies in Times. Not in just in the continent, but in the US specifically. And this was something where it was just done with a couple of researchers in the university and so on. And but then the product came out now, about 3 years back. But these transactions were happening about 5, 6, almost prior to that, 8 years to 10 years currently. So there's a lot of these happening on the background, and some of them will manifest as products at a later stage, but industries adopting these technologies to improve, and sometimes not even use the technology for what it was intended for as a product, but it ends up getting used somewhere else in that sense, and they say, oh no, this was actually initially something that was at a university, but now we repurposed it and adopted it into this technology, into this product eventually.
Dr. Langa, So where is the student in that story to avoid the Vodacom situation? Because I would like to believe that when we started with whatever innovation, the student submitted, their research work. And, what is the ownership? Does that remain, in the ownership of the university, or how do you, navigate that ownership between student and university?
Okay. So central to the ownership question is the policy. So we've got a intellectual property policy. And the intellectual property policy talks about ownership, but also talks about inventorship and creating. So there's no person called University of Johannesburg. So the University of Johannesburg, for instance, does not invent. People do. So you're a student, you're a researcher in the lab, as a staff member, you create, you invent. You always be the inventor. But then the university becomes the owner because they manage and make sure that the intellectual property is well protected. But then if there's commercialization and utilization, if we license, for instance, with all the money that comes, it then gets distributed between the university and the inventors and the creators. By the way, even if you leave the university, for as long as the patent is being commercialized, you get the benefits. And there's an act actually that is governing this. It's called the IPR Act, Intellectual Property Rights Act from publicly financed R&D institutions, which was made to allow for institutions to adopt, or universities and science councils to adopt, to ensure that the innovators get benefit sharing. And Section 10 talks about that, because at the end of the day, people must benefit from their inventions because they're the ones that then invent under the employment course and scope during their work at the university.
Mine is just a general question now regarding innovation in the country. What has been the impact of the intellectual property protection regimes in the country on innovation itself? That is, has it enhanced innovation? Has it improved it? Has it impeded? Just your view on the regime on innovation itself. Thanks.
I mean, of course, I'm biased to a certain extent because in a technology transfer office, our main instrument is, I suppose, the protection through patents or other subsequent intellectual property instruments. So in terms of them enabling or impeding, I think I would say, we see that it encourages researchers to want to file for patents or any other IP, because even the university has a KPI around, number of patents. It even forms part of, the academic work, because it's not just only publications, but also it's also innovation outputs. Those are equally important, because what's the point if you're just only publishing but not having social impact or a community or industry utility? So your research should go beyond. So in my micro environment where I am, we see, and if it is a reflection of society, we do see that it encourages more and more academics to want to innovate, and the measures which are the intellectual property registration protection mechanisms like patents registered and filed becomes a good indicator for us, and we're seeing more and more definitely patents going up in that sense. And I think so it encourages that there's an incentive. So naturally, if there's an incentive to innovate, I think then it impacts positively in that sense. But it's also very expensive and a very costly process. So it can impede innovation in that sense, because if you have to file for a patent, you would have to spend a bit of money. You need a patent attorney to draft the patent specification, and so on. So if you have to do that, for example, individually, I can imagine that could be a costly exercise. But in a university, we cushion that because we have a budget for filing for patents, because then we also get that as a rebate from government through the IPR Act, there's an IP fund where so for every rand that we spend, we can get up to 50 cents back. So we don't mind spending because then we can get it back. But we're also cautious because we assess before we file. We do, by the way, tell researchers that we can't file in some instances purely because we don't see novelty, inventiveness, and utility. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that maybe that positions what we do at DaVinci. Because whilst we don't have a focus on innovation issues, like you have your science department, your health, we are almost essentially a business leadership school and a business school as the institute. We have not ventured into where and the issue of management of innovation. It's something that I can see when you're explaining, you're actually dealing with how do you deal with the innovation itself. But there's a whole management process of how do you then manage that innovation as it is unfolding in front of you, so that you manage it into commercialization or whatever, but as a management function over that innovation. And I think that's the if you hear me, that's the top end of what we do. And it's good that I picked up that we probably need to find a way of seeing how do we collaborate or co-create that ability to bring the management of innovation over and above the innovations that we are doing. And that's why we did not approach you, not that we like you only at SABS, not that we like you only, we also want you to be a partner in the management of innovation. So that, because you're dealing with a lot of innovation there, but we found that our country, the problem at Vodacom is a management of innovation problem, except other things that we all know. But there was also a management of innovation problem, because if you read the story, you can see that the man did that and whatever, but there was no process to manage that thing, including saving the person or helping the person that is innovating to benefit out of the innovation. So when you have a management of innovation process, it would help you to pick up that. And I think in that standard, I've seen those steps that have been put there.
I think perhaps there's an opportunity to, even with the D students, to think about the innovation measurement from a research perspective, and how we create a common language around that, and what does that mean, and how do we socialize that and institutionalize that. So there are multiple opportunities from an institution's perspective. Prof. Paul, I wonder if you have final reflections of what has come out of here.
So we do have cooperation. We don't do it ourselves. But with the TT100, that is our cooperation in terms of innovation, because it's industry that does the innovation, but we do the recognition and the rewarding. So that's how we assist with the management of the innovation with industry. And many of those small industries, some way or the other, there's a link with DaVinci, because either a student or a manager has studied here or has a relative or family who's studying here, and then they get drawn in. So I think the opportunities are vast, because we are a business school, and to tap into the expertise that's been shared here from Dr. Langa, as well as from SABS, Maheya. So it's important, I think, to pursue this as an institution, because otherwise it's just going to be turning doctorates like it always has. But just moving the envelope into commercialization, I think, brings in an exciting opportunity. And I must say then that the levels of measurement that Dr. Langa spoke about are so important. And for me, it's so practical as well, because it's operationalizing it amongst the students who are doing the research, amongst the staff here who are managing the research, coordinating research, etc. We just have to find a way to bring it down to that level, because if I just move away from product and patent, everything is there already. Well, if I say everything, most of it is there in principle, because the candidate who completes a thesis, right up front, they sign off the IP. There's an agreement that they sign and they date. But should something come out of it, yes, like Dr. Langa explained, that it's not just the institution because you signed that. So already, just the publication, there's a reward to the student. So if it goes beyond that, yes, and there have been inquiries with patents previously. I know Professor HP handled that. But so it's the same principle, but I don't think we are encouraging and doing everything in our power to commercialize the research function where it ends up with patents or products. So thank you, I think, on your behalf, Mama Hall, to say thank you, because it certainly has opened up the space, it has opened up our consciousness to the opportunities here.